Hello everybody, it's Bassett here, and today I want to show you how you're supposed to scout in ZvP matchup. It's actually not really that complicated, and I'm going to show you two games and how you're supposed to react to each tech that Protoss race has. In the very beginning, you send the first overlord just across the map, and you just want to reach that section of the natural base, the wall, and see what is going there, right? It's actually gonna be pretty much the same every game you play. If your overlord reaches the base and there are no buildings and no pylon, it can sometimes mean that there is a proxy gate, like here, maybe like 4 proxy gates, and this means that you gotta put down 2 spine crawlers. That is the first case, but normally you will just see the gateways here, and in case you don't see them in that natural wall, sometimes you just gotta fly up there and you'll see a wall there as well. But in 99% of cases, you'll see something here, and this is our main point of scouting. We'll return back to it later. So, when you put down your second base, your second overlord also hangs around here, because you also want to check what this prop, the scouting prop, is doing, and you want to make sure that you are not getting cannon rushed from behind or even up front. Sometimes they can place the pylon here, the gate, the cannon, and they can try to cannon rush with shield batteries, stalkers, and mortars. That's a more complicated build order. It's not very often, it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes can be the case. And you also have to remember about this space between the minerals, and in the back of the minerals sometimes you can get cannon rush there. And when your base gets really close to getting finished, you just fly around the map as well. You can scout maybe this area a little bit, and then you just fly here around this spot on the map. So at about this time, your first overlord reaches the main base, and here you gotta look for the second pylon. The second pylon usually is placed somewhere around the first nexus, and you can see in this game against this Grandmaster Protoss that is exactly the case. So I'm gonna fly there and I'm gonna see his first building, hopefully. And you can see that in this case it's gonna be the Stargate. So for now the scouting is actually done, and I can say that I achieved my goal, and this is the most important piece of information that you can get. Usually there also will be one adept, and sometimes some players build a stalker. The unit that you see here also plays a huge role. If they open with an adept, that's something normal, that's something usual, they're probably gonna go for Twilight or Stargate. However, if they open with the stalker first, or they open with a sentry, usually it means something crazy or cheeky is gonna come up later on. Stalker is used to deny the scouting, and it could be used for proxy. For example, you do not manage to find the second pylon, he shoots down the overlord, and then it could be like a proxy Stargate. But in most cases, if there is the stalker first, it's gonna be either Twilight or Robo. In both cases, the reaction to this is going to be similar. I'm going to discuss it just slightly later in this video, where I actually face this kind of treatment. Here I'm going to lose my first overlord, but that's not a big deal because I already scouted the Stargate. In very rare cases, the Protoss player can just cancel the Stargate after getting the overlord, but normally that's not really that efficient, and they're still gonna stick with the plan. So right now, what you're gonna do is just perform your standard Zerg build order. So this means you just build as many drones as you can, you build some queens, some spores to defend against the oracles, and that would be it. For now, this is gonna be the easiest part of the game. The one thing though, you gotta also watch out for the first unit from the Stargate. If this is gonna be a void ray, this should be a problem as well, because if the Protoss player builds the void ray, there is going to be at least one reason to do so. He wants to be extra safe, but usually Protoss players, they want to be extra safe when they go for Skytos. Or sometimes, occasionally, they actually go for 7 gates all-in, and in that case, if you see the void ray, it's quite wise, I would say, to build a layer just slightly earlier. Normally, in this matchup, you build layer around 4:30, but in the case if you see the void ray first, I would suggest you should build it 30, maybe 40 seconds earlier, so that would be about 350 or something like that. But now, if you just see the oracle, let me see what was in this game, just want to check it out. Yeah, that was an oracle. About that time, your second overlord arrives to this base and you just want to keep it there. In the case if there was no Stalker, for example, he opened with 2 adepts, you just fly with your first overlord to another base, and that way you can see the timing of the third base. Probably this is not going to be the case in like Platinum League, Diamond League. I don't really know how early Protoss players like to expand there, but in Grandmaster League or like High Masters or Diamond, that is actually pretty common. Around minute 4 they're supposed to make the third Nexus, and with this extra overlord it helps a lot. If there is no Nexus, then it could be problematic, but let's return back to the second overlord. And about, I would say, minute 4, I'm flying a bit earlier here, but still, about minute 4 you should also fly in with this second overlord. The goal here is to see the next tech choice and the gases. Normally that would be a Twilight, and if you see the Twilight that is placed like this, in this case I didn't see the Twilight, but for example, if you see the Twilight that is placed at about minute 4, 4:10, this is okay. Usually means that the Protoss player is gonna go something standard, something normal, and in this case you can see it's blink and +1, and he's gonna be playing a proper macro game. In that very case, you just play normal and everything is good, but sometimes you can see the Twilight is ready at minute 4 already, and it means that the Protoss player just started it immediately after the Stargate, and that could be a problem, because if there is a Twilight at about 3:30, 3:40 after the Stargate, it usually means he's gonna go for this glaive upgrade and he's gonna go for the adept push. In that case, you also need to adjust. You need to add the Roach Warren a bit earlier. You need to maybe add the wall on the natural base, maybe the pylon nest. It really depends on what you want to do. It doesn't really matter what unit you prefer to play with. I play with roaches, and when you see this, you just make 6-7 roaches and some links as well, and then you can play whatever you want. But basically Stargate is the best option for Protoss because it provides him with the safest expansion, and it also means that nothing scary is probably going to happen to you, so you can easily draw up until minute 6, about that time, because about minute 6 Protoss players usually have enough infrastructure, they have enough gates, and at that moment they can actually start applying pressure. So that's like the only timing that you should be worried about. But again, it depends on the playstyle. Some Protoss players, they just prefer to go for the storms after that, they just go for the Templar archives, they go for the Robo, and they just stay at home, and in that case you could just draw up your 4th base. And basically the scouting ends at this stage of the game. Now you just need to do some actions. You can drop, you can go to lurkers, it doesn't really matter. But you sometimes should also check with links, just 1-2 links, just send them across the map and see what is going on, how many units, if he's adding the Templars, if he's adding Immortals, and so on. But basically the scouting for that particular build order is done. You can sometimes also check with the Overseer to see if there is the second Stargate, the fleet beacon, but usually it happens naturally and it's very easy to guess when it is going to happen. So this is the basic scouting for this matchup. Now let's talk a little bit about the Twilight and Robo. So here's another game of me playing against a barcode Protoss player, and you can see now that I'm doing the same scouting I did in the previous game. The first overlord is already there, and the second one is flying towards his third base, towards this spot, and then it's going to be flying inside the base. I check and I see the second pylon as mentioned, and I know that there is no proxy because the pylon is there, but I still haven't seen the main tech choice, at least for now. And the Protoss player is going to be adding the Twilight. You can see he's adding it on another base because he tracked my overload. He knows that I'm going to be spending some extra time trying to find out the tech, maybe trying to find something unusual, but I'm just going to see that building and I'm going to be able to react. So usually when you see the Twilight, it means one of 3 things. The room here for Protoss player is a bit bigger. He can play glaives, he can play Dark Templars, and sometimes he can just go for a mortal push with, or maybe like a Zilla charge, something like that. If you see no Twilight but you see the Robo, it's 100% gonna be an immortal push or something really scary with sentries, and this means you need to react accordingly. So in that very case, when you see the Twilight, you just turn your brain off and you just do one simple thing. You drone up until you have about 36 to 39 workers, and then you add the second gas, layer, and Roach Warren. Why the number of workers? Why is it 36 to 39? It depends on how well you defend against the first two adepts and how many resources you invested into your links. In this game you can see I overbuilt links just a bit. I made extra 8. You only need like 8 in total, but I already have 2, so that is not the optimal start, but doesn't really matter. I defend here and maybe I'm losing some drones. No, this game I'm not losing anything. And actually I lost a bit. Yeah, I lost 4. And in that case you just go for 36 and then 1 gas and 1 roach warren. In that particular game I decided to go for a different build order. I was planning that beforehand. I wanted to go for melee, but normally you just go for the gas, roach warren, and so. If you manage to scout that this is gonna be the dark shrine, that will be also a great idea to add the extra spore crawler around each base. The DTs they arrive about minute 4:30, maybe minute 5, depending on the tech, on the timings and so on, and on the map size. But normally you still want to build some spores just in case, because sometimes when you make the layer it just doesn't end in time and you can still lose your third base, especially if you don't know the direction of the prism. And after that it really depends on your execution. You are supposed to build a couple of roaches. If you are playing against adepts, the number would be like 5, 6, 7, maybe 8, depends on how much you have. And after that you only build links, because you need something to stop the adepts when they try to shade. And then you just counter it with roaches and links pretty much. Maybe you also want to add the roach speed. And if it's the DTs, you do pretty much the same, but you just add way less links. You just substitute with roaches and you just want to feel safe. When you feel safe, when you have like 14 roaches or so, you have queens in position, and you just go for drones again and you just play a normal macro game after that. It would be also a good idea, since about that time you are supposed to have a lair, and it would be also really great to just fly with 1 overseer. So in that game you can see my layer was a little bit late because I went for the upgrade first, but you can see that the war prism with DTs, it arrives about minute 5, so about that time you should have the spores and the layer done, and you should be able to deflect that pretty easily. And that would be also a great idea to just scout with your overseer. Could be like some random overlord just morphing and just flying in and seeing what's gonna happen. And you also wanna keep track of the third base, because the third base should be about, or rather around minute 5 or 6. If there is no third base, that could be a bit alarming, because maybe this guy is actually gonna go with an immortal follow-up, and you can see in this game he is not really rushing to take the base. He instead wants to just commit to some army and some tech, but after all he's probably gonna go for the base in the end. I don't really remember that game, but it's not really that important. So pretty much when you see Twilight or Robo, just wanna say it again, you just want to build some roaches, some gas, and a certain amount of workers to defend that, and then you can play whatever you want, because after that the game can diverge into a big number of different scenarios. It could be colossi, it could be disruptors. He could play just 0 to mortal archons and take the third base. He can also go for a sentry push, and here unfortunately there is no like single clear answer that I can give to you. At this point you just gotta scout yourself with the overseer. Could be a bit tiresome, could take some time from your macro mechanics and other stuff, but it just has to be done, because otherwise you risk losing a lot of games, right? Because sometimes it's going to be the Gate-Nexus, sometimes it's going to be an immortal push, and you just gotta be careful of that. And that is actually pretty much it for this matchup. You don't really need to know anything else. There are like some very niche specific cases, but it's probably not going to really happen to you, so that's just what you need to take into account. I will leave the full timings and all other related stuff in the description and in the pinned comment, so feel free to check it out. Thanks a lot for watching, subscribe for more StarCraft 2 guides and other StarCraft 2 content. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.